This is Don Rickabaugh with the Owner Financing and Note Investing podcast. I'm so happy today to have Tracy Z from noteinvestor.com with me here today. Tracy, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me.
Absolutely, Don. It's a pleasure and my honor.
Okay. Yeah. No, Tracy, you've been around for a really long time, and I've known of your name because I heard it long before I met you. But I always knew that anytime that in the note space we're talking about Tracy Z, it was always with, the highest regard and respect and kindness. So you've built a lot of good juju in the space, I would say. So since I don't actually know you all that well, and I want to get to know you more, and I appreciate you've had me on a few times with your I forgot what exactly do you call it, the Cash Flow Expo?
Yeah, Cash Flow Expo, and we do Wise Women Expo too.
And Wise Women Expo. Well, I'm not sure how wise I am. I think it might be going backwards. I might be Benjamin buttoning it. Some days I feel like that, Other times I feel wise. Yes, but anyway, tell me how you got started, and let's just start. How did you get started investing in notes? And was there anything you were doing prior to that? So just kind of your life story and how you kind of got to this point.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a rural area up in Washington State on the kind of up there by Canada, Idaho, and Washington, that corner.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I worked for some attorneys and then an attorney that had a title company, and they had an escrow servicing company that collected payments. And we used to gather, I'd go and do title searches, and we would gather from the courthouse lists of people who had sold property with seller financing, took back a note. And we had people that would come in and pay us for those. And I just thought, well, that's so fascinating. And we did closings for seller financing. And so that was my first experience with seller financing.
Were you a paralegal or something like that? Or
I ended up being an LPO, which in Washington State gives you a certain license to close real estate transactions. It's not formally a paralegal. I don't have formal education. I mean, beyond high school and some college classes related to real estate. So that's how I was introduced to the business. I'm just a testament that anybody can figure this out, right? That's what I say.
Fantastic. That's a great start. Okay.
So I did that, and then I moved to the big city. I say that in quotation marks, of Spokane, Washington. And I went to work for a company called Metropolitan Mortgage and Securities, and that was in 1988. And they bought and sold real estate notes. And the gentleman that founded that company had been buying and selling seller financed real estate notes since the 1950s. So they've been doing it a while. And I worked with them for 10 years and worked my way up from closing their transactions to underwriting them to being on the marketing side, the loan committee, and eventually became a vice president of that company. Myself and another lady, first female vice presidents of that company. So it was a real honor, and I loved everything about it. But I couldn't buy notes when I worked there. I couldn't. There was a conflict of interest. They wouldn't let us.
Oh, of course, that would be. So name the company again, and about what years were you there?
It was called Met, and they were the big.
Oh, Met.
Yeah, they were the big buyer of notes through their insurance company during that time. And so that would have been 88 to 97. And in 97, went out and started my own company, co-founded with my husband, Fred Rui, and Diversified Investment Services. And we started this little website called noteinvestor.com, just kind of seeing what would happen with it. And so, but the big thing was we wanted control of our time, right? And they don't have that when you work for a corporation. So when we started, and we were doing real estate, I was, as a single person, did a lot of real estate investing and bought and sold homes using seller financing, but I couldn't buy the notes, and I didn't want to be a landlord. And Fred and I met through the note industry. We got married in 97. And so then we were able to, one of us to start buying notes, and then eventually both of us doing that together. And so I love the note business. It's been good to me. It's been 30 plus years now, and we've seen it through a lot of cycles, but that's how I got started. I did not want to be a landlord. I wanted to be a lien lord. And I can say that from experience, having owned property before I owned notes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I didn't realize you had such depth. I mean, because those companies met when I would 97-ish, I guess, right near the end. It was in that 95, wait, yeah, 95, 96, 97 when I started, I'm a nurse, I'm a mom, but I'm starting to do these weekend warrior things, and go to Noteworthy,
Yep.
And so that's when I heard about Met, but then they didn't last how much longer did they last than 97? And
I
what was it? I've heard stories and I want to see what you say. What it is that took them down or why something went.
Yeah, so I think, and it was in 2000 sometime that happened. Sadly, C. Paul Sandifer, the man who founded it, passed away. He was in his 80s, and
Mhm.
his son took over. And in my opinion, somebody else might have a different opinion, but in my opinion, the son didn't operate it the same way that his father did. His father always made sure they were careful, they kept reserves, they paid their investors, and the son took it in different direction of not their bread and butter seller finance notes, but doing all these big glorious commercial deals. And in my personal opinion, that's the reason that happened. They got away from their bread and butter, which were seller finance notes. That I can say I'm glad it happened after I left, because it would have broke my heart to have been there during that time. But
Right.
it's not the notes that were bad. It's just, mismanaging, in my opinion, the what type of investments that you do and making sure you protect yourselves.
Right. And weren't they the ones that did a lot of innovation around the partial
Yes.
products,
Mhm.
and web, their servicing and tell me more about that. I mean, were you involved in developing some of that program too, or?
Yeah, so the partials were a big piece of what we developed, and fortunately, we had a really good legal team there, and so they get a lot of the credit for writing those documents, and I was involved in it as well because was one of the ones who had to explain it to the customers. So it's like, can we please put this in plain language? And then servicing through MetWest, and there's a lot of people that used to work there that went out into the industry. So I probably got my love from partials then, because if anybody's listening, they're not sure. A partial is when you get a full assignment and a full endorsement, and you have an agreement that says you get to receive payments equal to a certain amount. And then once those payments come in, then the note gets assigned back, and so does the deed of trust or mortgage. So you're owning it fully and controlling it for part of the time. And that is a great way to maximize interest and minimize your exposure. We call it investment to value. And I think one partial, and what happens a lot on partials, I've been a buyer and a seller on partials, is
Mhm.
when you bought a partial, somebody will come back and want to sell you more. And so I
Right.
had one seller, I think the max I've had now is 5 times they've sold some more payments on their note. So they're very creative. We see a lot of them being used now. I think partials and wraps, wraparound mortgage notes, are probably the two most powerful tools that we have in our note investing space.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that up because, after coming out of my 3-year sabbatical, where this is pretty much hiding under a rock, when I came back and I said, "Gosh, what would I want to be focusing on, given given what I'm seeing and what I think could potentially happen?" Partials are definitely one of the ones, and then actually buying and of course, that usually means that there's not existing bank mortgages there, right? This is all private paper. And then buying property with owner financing because it's really kind of the same thing. And if I didn't want to keep it, I can always turn that back around. And is that the wrap that you're talking about? Is you getting under contract, or are you talking about wrapping basically subject to type deals, or what's your definition there of the wraps?
Well, there's different kinds of wraps. So a wrap is basically, in a nutshell, in my mind, is like if I'm receiving interest on a note and mortgage or note and deed of trust, say at 9, and then I've got a note and deed of trust or note mortgage I'm still paying on. hopefully it would be less at 3, 4, 5, 6%. And in addition to buying property, like you said, at a good deal with owner financing, now I can sell it with owner financing, and I can make money off of the buy and sell of the property itself. And I can make money off of, I'm paying a lower interest rate than I'm receiving. So my first choice would be to do it with seller finance paper because it's more flexible. But we've certainly done it also where those bank loans stay out there too at that low 3, 4%. The bank loans are just a little riskier because they have the option to call them due. They don't typically, but it has to be something you're prepared if you need to sell your wrap note to pay off that underlying if they do call it due, or sell a partial and pay off the underlying. So there's lots of outs, but it could be either kind of paper, Don. It could be wrapping seller finance paper or with seller finance paper, or wrapping an underlying bank loan with seller finance. So either one works. Just depends on what's already there and what needs to be created.
Exactly. The things that don't work is if the existing financing, because people are going, well, if they've got 100% or 90% loan to value with a bank loan, there's no room there, right? So that would take a quite different strategy. But I like the point you brought out is you gotta be prepared to have a plan and disclose to everyone that you've got to pay off that underlying. You got to have a way, because there is the chance of that happening. And it seems like there's a lot of a lot of hype going on of these sub 2 deals, and a lot of eyebrow raising there.
I agree with you. It concerns me that there's people doing it that don't understand and disclose the risk and haven't planned for the risk, because those are the sorts of things that, number one, make deals go bad, which is not fair to people. And number two, when deals go bad, then legislators start looking at it. And so these wraps have been along as long as we've been in the business, right? I mean, in California, they call them AITDs, all-inclusive trust deeds. Texas has them. Those are actually 2 states that have very specific rules around them. And those rules are meant to protect people and have disclosure. So they're not something new. I just hope that people do them the right way, because they can be very powerful if used correctly.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Well, gosh, so tell me, one of the things I think let's just hype this up a little bit, because in the note business, like usually, okay, if you're in the real estate business, or you just buy houses, fix them up and flip them, it's not a bad model, but the holding the loans, I mean, I don't really want a huge property portfolio, frankly. I mean, some is fine, and especially if it's local here to me, or I'm helping my kids get into homes and things like that, or my gardeners or friends and family program. But the paper is just so much more attractive to me. And I know the tax treatment isn't as good as that Schedule E, at least at this point, right? But in what we do, I mean, I want you to explain the deal, but you get paid up front. A lot of times you get a piece of the payment all the way through it, especially on these wraps that we're talking about, right? And then there's a spread on the end. And then, my goodness, there could be a fourth. I mean, you could take an option to buy your own note, right? So even if you're a real estate deal, I don't understand why you'd ever do a real estate deal and not take an option to buy your own note at a discount. So, I mean, I love it when you can have 2, 3, 4, 5 different potential profit centers just from what we do, from understanding the discounted market for notes. Just how that works, just to me, opens up. It's the most incredible tool ever, just to learn a little bit about it so you can reverse engineer other deals. I mean, just, don't you agree? I mean,
I 100% agree. And it gives you power not only over your life, but your finances. And it applies in so many things. I always tell people, learn a financial calculator. I happen to learn on the HP12C. You can use the 10B, you can use a program, but really understand how time value of money and compounding works. Because that is very powerful. I've used that on cars and boats and all sorts of things that don't relate to real estate and notes. So it's a very powerful thing. But notes are wonderful because you have an income stream, a cash flow that's backed by real estate, something concrete. And
Right.
so it's an investment vehicle, an asset we all know and like, real estate, but we don't have the hassles of the tenants, the toilets, the trash. And I don't want that. I've done that. I don't want it.
Right.
I have a saying that's stuck on a post-it note that reminds me all the time right here on my desk. It's controlling your time is the highest return that money pays. So I'm constantly asking myself, is this giving me more control of my time or not? And so I love notes because for me, it's an asset I like, real estate, but it allows me more time and I can have control more assets with less time by doing notes. And that's the stage of my life I'm in right now. Fortunately, it wasn't always that case. I mean, for when we first started doing our own business, I was having to hustle to do a lot of deals to get money now, right? I didn't get to buy every note. I had to get money now. So when you do that, you find the note, you find an investor, and you make a fee for matching them up. You can earn a referral fee. Then you start working yourself into partials where you're just selling off enough payments to get the person you're buying from whole, and you're keeping those payments on the back end, like you said. And then you get to the point where, I've got enough in my retirement account, I can start buying these notes. If you're worried about not having depreciation on real estate, then I tell people, then do those note deals in your retirement account because those are tax free or tax deferred, and do these other deals outside your retirement account that might have some depreciation benefits. So buy some deals with seller finance, buy the real estate with seller finance and wrap it. Maybe you do those outside your retirement account and you get some of that depreciation in there.
Yeah, it's a good comment. You know, one of the things that really helped me when I needed to take some time off just to reboot myself, one of the things that just kept me going was the note business. I couldn't have done that if I was still working as a nurse. I wasn't even going after new deals. Some things because of my positioning, would come to me automatically, just drop in my lap, but I wasn't pursuing any business for 3 years. And not only did the cash flow continue, but then I got these unexpected payoffs, more back end. So a lot of times I would say, well, I don't need money now on some deals, but I'm going to want it later. So I wouldn't take any money up front, but then I have this amount that's building and sometimes you think, oh, maybe I'll get 10 or 20,000 down the road sometimes, but the things that really kept me going besides some of the cash flow, that chunk change that came in, is that I had remainder interests. Didn't make anything up front. I didn't make anything on the monthly. I was just paying off my partial partner that I brought in. And number one, they're kept in really safe position and they're making a good return. And so doing that, I wasn't even paying attention, but like the part that kept growing more and more that was due to me at the end. And so, I mean, sometimes I would get these checks like, oh my gosh, I'm getting an extra 30,000, 35,000, 20,000, 40,000 that I kind of almost forgot about because it wasn't in my main thing. So people that are worried about, there's a lot of people worried about retirement or what if they lose their Joe job. I mean, I'm just so glad that I've never depended on like the government or a pension, anybody else except for me for my retirement. So when people are going, well, what should I do? How do I care for my retirement? Well, make your own by buying notes and selling off partials. And if you don't need the money now, then save it all for later. And I'll tell you what, you're going to need money later as much as you need it now. So, I mean, it's just been a lifesaver for me where it's like, oh my gosh, it was just like, God just like kept bringing me money when I didn't have a lot of bandwidth to focus on it, or I didn't know, so much crazy things that were happening and probably will still be happening, and I wasn't sure, what direction I was going to go, what mattered, but I just keep coming back to this because like you, it's kind of just, I just love it, and I love talking about it. I love doing it. Love helping other people learn about it. And you've done a really great job talking about that. Why don't you talk about, you've got a very robust way of taking newbie note people and just showing them the ropes. So talk about your programs and what you think's the most powerful and effective way to bring people in, and
Yeah,
what
I
you
appreciate you
recommend.
asking about that. I was responsible for training a group of 50 closers when I was at Metropolitan. And so a lot of people aren't used to notes or experienced with notes. And so I got good at explaining them and getting to the crux of it. And so when we started our own company, it wasn't initially with the intent to start training. We were just doing notes. But what happened is that I kept seeing these things being taught that I knew weren't right. And I would be like, that's not right. Why are they telling people that? Can you believe this? And Fred's like, well, then if you're not happy about it, you got to go do something about it. Right. And I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't want to teach. I just want to do notes. And so interestingly enough, Don, that's one of the most rewarding pieces that I took on. Both Fred and I are teaching other people how to do this because when you start out, you have something to prove, and then I had something to build, and then I had something to share. And so that's what's cool now is I'm in this phase of my life where I have something to share based on all of these things that I had proved and built along the way. And so we do that through noteinvestor.com. We have lots of free information on our website. And then we also have some paid for trainings, and we also have a membership group. And then we do other things throughout the year where we make them available for free. And that's like Cash Flow Expo. It's a 4-day
Right.
online event. Wise Women Expo. I'm very passionate about teaching and encouraging women to invest. They're very good at it for whatever reason. Many of us didn't learn that or get that confidence growing up. And so I like showcasing other women like yourself that have done a great job investing and building their own path, because we see like, if they can do it, I can do that too. So we give back through those different methodologies, and it's good for us too. Our membership group, we kept everything affordable, and we are very approachable. So it's just, what would I tell my sister or my mom or my family member or my best friend if they were going to get started in notes? That's the kind of information that we share because we want to keep them safe. Because notes are an investment, there's risk, but there's things you can do to minimize that risk, and that you have outs if the things happen, like somebody quits paying. What can I do? I can foreclose
Right.
and take back the property. Well, how do I make sure I'm able to foreclose and take back the property? Well,
Right.
let's look at your documents. Let's make
Right.
sure you get title insurance. Let's make sure taxes have been paid and the insurance on the property's been done. So those are the more technical things you and I deal with every day, but other people may not realize that. And so those are the sort of things that we share.
Yeah, fantastic. So what would you say is, and I get this email to me, but quite a bit, or on my other calls, my property paper for life calls that I do a couple times a month. But where's the best place to get started finding notes? How do you find a note? And you've got people that are, the mailing systems, the postcards, the letters. Then there's people that spend thousands of dollars on SEO, just, to rank high, and paid advertising. What are some of maybe your top three ways to, how do you find a note to buy?
So all those methodologies work. We've used them all over the years. If I had to pick one that's my favorite, it would be networking and referrals. So if you're getting started out, you've got to think about, okay, maybe I have funds to invest, maybe I don't. That's the first question you have to ask. If you do, then you've got to make sure you have the knowledge to protect those funds. If you don't, you've got to find deals, because there's lots of investors out there that'll be happy to buy your note if you can find the deal. And so that's either way, you've got to learn to find the deal. So I prefer referrals and networking, but those take a lot of time and energy to
Right.
build. You don't just wake up one day and have this network where you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm looking to deploy this cash. You got any deals? So you do have to develop those relationships. I think that getting very active in your own local market is great. There's a lot of real estate investor clubs now that you can get. Everybody is interested in talking about seller financing. I still prefer seller finance notes. Those are my niche. If you wanted to not do direct mail, but still pick up the phone and network with people who've seller financed, you can purchase a list of people who've carried back more than one note in the last 12 months, and you can narrow down your focus to just reaching out to them. They tend to be more business oriented, so you don't have as many problems with the do not call and the anti-spam laws. I mean, you always have to honor those, but that would be another way to network and referral. So I like the seller finance notes. I would do that. We've also done direct mail, and we still do SEO, and we still run ads on Google. So we've done all those, but my number one favorite way would be networking and referrals.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize that this is a business, right? It's a business like anything. If you're really gonna, be in it, just like if you're gonna be an insurance agent or a realtor or any type of business, you've got to spend some time, and it does take time. I guess people like the two of us, we spend time doing things like this, creating content, doing speaking things, and so but that's a big marketing thing that takes years and a lot of time, effort, maybe not a ton of money, but definitely a lot of time. So yeah, it's really interesting. What do you see coming if you got out your crystal ball? What do you think's going to happen in the real estate market, finance market, and based on that, how do you position yourself?
We have a real problem with home affordability in this nation. And it's not just because interest rates are high. And when we say high, we mean high compared to three, but they're not high compared to when I got into the business
Right.
in the 80s, right? They're low. In fact, if you look at a 30-year historical average, about 7.5, 7.7 is the average mortgage interest rate. So when I talk about home, certainly increased interest rates have made it harder for people to get approved for home loans because their payment goes up, their principal and interest, when the interest goes up. But what's created that even greater has been the large appreciation in prices. And so properties are going up at much higher rates than people's wages are going up. That did get partially inflated because rates were low and money was easy. And now everything's resetting a little bit. So I lived through the '08 financial crisis and got hit by it in my own note portfolio and real estate. So I'm always keeping an eye on, is that going to happen again? And what I realize is that nothing ever happens exactly the same. It just
Right.
leaves, history doesn't repeat itself. It just leaves clues to what might happen. So
Right.
I'm looking at positioning. I think that if you can find ways to be involved in anything in the affordable housing range, I think there will always be a need for that. And so here in Florida, at least in other parts of the country, mobile home and land provide that affordable home ownership. And they also provide some good returns while you're helping people get in a home. So I think you've always got to keep an eye on that. I'm avoiding the higher end stuff. I always have, maybe just because my clients, tend to live not on the high end. We just kind of like to be good enough, right? I
Right.
want freedom of time. I don't want to rule the world. So I tend to look at assets like that. And I think you have to keep going, though. It's easy to say, I'm just going to take my money off the table and take my marbles and go home. And I don't think that either is a good approach, because there's lots of opportunities still out there. I think you just have to know your lane and be ready to adapt and change if the markets change. I would say right now we're keeping our investment to values low. You can't bank on all the properties appreciating like they had been. So I think partials are a great way to do that. So I think it's protecting your investment and then making sure you get a good return on it. So what's the saying? You want your return of investment even before you want your return on investment. And for note investors, that's watching your ITV.
Yeah. There was a couple uh, that have been just private investors of mine for a number of years. And then sadly, the wife died, who was the one that I mostly talked with. I think she was the main, I don't know. She just dealt with it. All I know is that he signed things, but mainly I only talked to her. But so then I guess it was a few months after she had passed, I just sort of reached back out and I said, are you still going to be doing, loans? And I said, I have something potentially that would have been something consistent, with what they were doing before. And he goes, well, I'm getting a lot more on my money now. I'm getting 10, 11, 12, and I'm just doing a lot better now. So I don't think that things you're bringing me are going to be, because in exchange for the safety, supreme safety, they were doing 8, in that 7, 8%,
Yeah.
once in a while 9, depending. But, now I just talked to him just to touch base because I had something else come up that I go, well, actually, this one I could pay 10 on, and let's just see where he's at, and I could still make my spread on it, even though it's super safe. It was like less than 40% investment to value.
Wow. Yeah.
And he it turns out that um, he's got like 3 foreclosures going
Oh
and people
no.
that just recently quit paying. And so he was making the higher yields, but now he's got a lot more headaches to deal with. And doesn't mean those higher yields actually equals more headache, because you can still do that in parts of the country. But I don't know, investors, they get the yield greed going and not thinking about what you just said, return of your principal before you figure uh on that. So,
Mhm.
and then he's going, well, there's a lot of equity. Okay, hopefully. But what if the market drops 20%? Then it gets like, oh, you're just barely getting out with your investment. Have you seen more foreclosures? What are you seeing in from your lens of
We look up the monthly foreclosure numbers and they're still at all-time lows. And that's primarily because people do have so much equity. We do see that consumer debt starting to get more delinquency, and that could be a precursor. We went to a convention recently where an economist from the MBA spoke, and he said that, they really watch delinquencies and foreclosures compared to the unemployment rate, and they overlaid low unemployment with low delinquencies on mortgages, and they pretty much tracked right along for like the last 30, 40 years. So their prediction, and I think this makes sense, is that we would have to see probably an increase in unemployment. And then we would probably see more delinquencies. But I do see that people's budgets are stretched, and we're starting to see that on credit card debt and car loans and that sort of thing as well. But when people go delinquent on their properties right now, there's a lot of equity in there. But I'll say one thing, and I feel bad for your prior investor on this, is that it's never the properties you want to get back that you get back. When there's tons of equity in there, that nice property, that is not the property as a note investor we get back. We get the
right.
ones that they have trashed and there's no wiring left and they've stole the AC and
Yeah.
it's just, I'm telling you, yeah, that's just sadly the ones that are nice and decent. They have enough equity, or they can sell them off and pay you off. So I'd still like to be the note investor on a safe return than I do the landlord or buying NPNs. I know buying non-performing notes was big for a while, but there's just not that much inventory out there.
So do you on the states that we have a few states now that require you to be licensed to even hold, be a beneficiary? Are you going through and getting licensed in the states that you want to work in, or how are
We're
you
trying to
handling
build that list and find good attorneys. We brought several attorneys on that we paid for to come on and give advice to our members on that, because I'm either of the thing, I'll avoid those states, or if I'm in those states a lot, then yeah, we need to go through the process of getting licensed. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would love for us all to collaborate and like have this Google Doc, and when we find links or information that we all just put it in there, not giving legal or financial advice, right? But just sharing that kind of information. Fortunately, it's still not as regulated. It's hit or miss. It just depends on the state.
Right. And it's also, there's some things that are more likely to be a problem and less, but it's just, I just see this pattern that I don't care for, is just more regulation makes it harder and harder for the little guy, the middle class America, just to run a small business. You've got to have all these dollars and attorneys on retainer, and it's not a happy situation. And precisely why being a landlord is less and less appealing, because there's more and more interference, and we have a different sort of bent, it seems like.
What are you doing on your side? Are you focusing on certain states or avoiding certain
Yeah,
states?
there's certain things that I'll avoid, or I'll just, so if I get a really good deal, then that instead of taking that one down or having my investors, I might say, this is one I broker to someone else who's willing to, do all of that. But I'm kind of at the same thing with you. It's like, okay, let's just see, I like the idea of your Google list, because we just need to know more and be a little more nimble, just so that we're not blindsided down the road. I think it's unfortunate and irritating, but
It is, and that's part of why I got involved with the Seller Finance Coalition. We helped them put on the one-day event last year because we have a lot of experience with online live events. It's because it's like, again, I don't like it. So what am I going to do? What's my role that I can help have some positive impact on it? So I see that as a potential thing. If we find good attorneys that know the law in that state, we share it, because then we don't have to go find an attorney to teach them what we do, to pay them a lot of money to go research it. So I think if we can all collaborate, and like you mentioned, there's people like Shri who get licensed in a lot of states, so those might be deals you refer. You've got First National Acceptance and Grand Bank, they're the big buyers, right? And we still refer a certain number of deals. Some we buy for ourselves, some we refer, some we partial out. So I think those kinds of networks over time really pay off. And yeah, we have to keep an eye on that. I don't want more legislation. I can promise you that. I know we're in agreement on that.
Well, wow. Thank you so much. So, it's just a pleasure to be with you, and appreciate what you stand for and what you provide in the industry. And again, you can see Tracy at noteinvestor.com. And also, you're active on social media. I've just started ramping up on that a little bit, so I stumbled into you there. But you can find, is it under Note Investor or Tracy Z on the social medias?
Both. We have a noteinvestor.com social media
Okay.
presence, and then Tracy Z as well. And Don, thank you for having me, and thanks for being such a great contribution to the note industry. I'm glad
Oh,
Note supported you during your sabbatical, and I'm so glad you're
yeah.
back full force because I missed you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. All right. Well, I look forward to talking to you the next time we get a chance. And again, thank you very much for your time and your wisdom.
All right. Thanks. Happy note investing.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.